In all corners of the Earth, the natural world is home to remarkable landscapes and creatures of unusual behavior. On this journey, we see dramas unfold among animal inhabitants, as they have since the beginning of time, and take an enchanting look at the treasures to be discovered in these hidden worlds. It was more than 130 million years ago that volcanoes erupting from the seabed first created the island of Komodo, with its tallest mountain peaking at more than 600 meters. Now part of Indonesia and about 480 kilometers east of Bali, Komodo is an arid land, apart from its forested valleys and coastal mangrove swamps. And in those valleys and swamps, and on a few outlying islands, live creatures that seem to come straight from mythology. For the past several hundred years, people have also lived on Komodo, staying mainly along the coasts. Stories surrounding dragons may have started after Chinese sailors were blown off course here, and later took embellished tales of these incredible creatures home with them. It wasn't until the mid-20th century that scientists even attempted to investigate these tales. But what they found was exactly what had been reported: fearsome predators twice the size of a man. They are the world's largest lizards, the dragons of Komodo. At dawn, in a forested valley 1.5 kilometers behind a coastal village, a Komodo dragon, almost 3 meters long, emerges from his lair. He spent the cold night in a shelter he's dug in a dry riverbed. But even so, he's lost a lot of body heat and his movements are sluggish. Before he can become more active, he needs to walk to a sunny spot. The dragons are Komodo's only large predators. They take the place of the tigers, leopards or bears found on continents or other islands. But because their habitat is only sparsely populated by human beings, human-dragon contact has traditionally been limited. This reptile is big enough and fierce enough to kill any animal on Komodo, if it's warmed up and primed for a surprise attack. But it's too early in the day for this one, and the Rusa deer is safe. In fact, this male is heading for another kind of rendezvous, with a female. A male can gauge a female's interest by licking her and rubbing his chin over her body. Although he's normally quite an aggressive animal, he's gentle when approaching the female. Males and females who share the same territory will often form long-term bonds, but their courtship must be maintained throughout the year. The mating ritual is complicated and delicate, involving a lot of physical contact. It's important that the male doesn't make a mistake. If a female is disinterested, she might run away or respond aggressively. And in some cases where a female encounters an unfamiliar male, she might even kill him. Because he's cold-blooded, the male needs to spend the morning raising his body temperature. He wanders off to look for a sunny spot. Two hours later, the island is fully awake. In the mangrove forest that form a narrow green line between the mountains and the sea, the tide is low. Macaques venture onto the exposed banks to look for crabs. The female dragon heads towards the mangrove forest. At low tide, she might find some fish stranded on the mud. But mudskippers are able to escape by hopping away from her. And crabs can do a disappearing trick. Dragons will eat whatever comes their way, dead or alive. Meals can range from items as small as this fish snack to ones as large as pigs, goats, deer, and even water buffalo. She finds her food mainly by smell, using both her nostrils and her tongue. She can detect the stench of carrion from several kilometers away. Something across the water is worth investigating, although that means a dip. But dragons show no fear of water. Swimming is easier than picking her way through mangrove roots. It's only a small scrap of food she finds, but worth the drenching. The monkey will be safe if it stays high in the trees. The female now needs to rest as the sun beats down on the mangrove forest. The male dragon is now warm enough to walk the 1.5 kilometers to the edge of Komodo village. He regularly patrols this hill, looking for any goats that might have strayed from the herd. This is a good position for an ambush. But the goats spot him. Little is known about the history of the human population on Komodo, but the inhabitants of Komodo village, the only permanent settlement on the island, are thought to be the descendants of criminals that were once exiled here. The small fishing community has around 1,000 inhabitants, and to them the dragon is called Ora. And while the majority of villagers make their livelihood from fishing, they have always respected their island's namesake. Interactions between humans and Komodos are rare, but the reality of living in a land of dragons is never far away. On occasion, auras have ambushed and even killed people. Towards the middle of the day, it's too hot on the hillside. The male dragon heads for a waterhole in the shady forest. He needs to cool down. If his body temperature rises even a degree or two over 42 degrees Celsius, he could overheat and die. The Rusa deer are already drinking. It's the dry season, and for much of the year there are only a few places on Komodo where fresh water can be found. The dragon has to drink, and then either rest in the shade or go back to his burrow for a while. The deer are very aware of his presence. But when there's so little standing water, animals that would normally choose to avoid the dragons have to take risks. The male is still too hot. He needs to lie down and rest in the shade. In a whole day, he can manage just 3 hours of activity. Meanwhile, the female dragon has decided to leave the mangrove forest. She's heading for the cool of a limestone cave where she can escape the heat of the midday sun, when temperatures can reach almost 43 degrees Celsius. More deer arrive at the waterhole for a drink and walk nervously past the resting male. He weighs over 90 kilograms and could run at close to 20 kilometers per hour to ambush them. A wild pig family arrives for a reviving mud bath, and they have a bit more bravado. Some zebra finches also enjoy a splash. It's late afternoon, and the temperature is still close to 40 degrees. Deep within the limestone cave, the female continues to rest in the cool. Very little is known about the nesting behavior of Komodo dragons in the wild. but they've been known to construct nests near their sleeping burrows. This is where she'll bury her eggs when the time comes. Komodo dragons guard both eggs and nest during the first part of the incubation period, which lasts a total of 8 months. She returns to this cave each year to lay her eggs, and the floor is marked by her tracks. She shares her secret lair with fruit bats found only on these islands. They act as additional guardians, alerting her if other dragons enter the cave to dig or eat her eggs. As darkness falls, the bats stream out on their nightly foray. Meanwhile, the Komodo dragons burrow down for the night. Before the sun gets too high, the male starts his day with a trip to a favored stretch of beach. Komodo village fishermen clean their nets from the previous night's trip and throw the scraps into the sea. The dragon produces large quantities of saliva to help it gulp down its prey. And this saliva can in fact be deadly. It contains more than 50 strains of bacteria, some so virulent that even if a deer manages to escape with only a bite, it's just a few days before it's weakened with infection. The dragon will then stalk it until he can launch a second, fatal attack. It's now the female's time to hunt, and she smells something in a tree. A baby Komodo dragon. It's only 3 months old, and will spend its first 4 years living in the trees, eating mostly insects. Dragons are cannibals, and have no compunction about eating the eggs or young of their own species. But luckily for the youngsters, the adults are too heavy to climb trees. It will be 4 years old before it's grown to nearly 2 meters long and is fast enough to run away from adults. By midday, more animals are crowded at the waterhole, and tension is mounting. To defend their drinking place, the deer force off the pigs. The pigs can smell the male dragon, who's come to drink again. The deer are tense. Dragons are known to kill large prey items, and pigs are a favorite. Though dragons can run at around 17 kilometers an hour for short distances, their preferred method of attack is ambush. One pig comes too close and is taught a lesson. The dragon is now agitated and even more dangerous, and most of the deer sense this. His lunge at a sitting deer only narrowly misses. He's lost a meal and heads off to rest in the shade. His female approaches, also seeking the shade of the forest. And all of a sudden, the male's more interested in chasing her. It's the start of the mating season, and all his energy is now concentrated on wooing his female with gentle strokes. With claws that could easily rip her open, he pulls her underneath him. She'll only accept him if he completely dominates her. It looks as if he's missed his opportunity again. He makes one last dash. And finally, she has to submit. If the mating was successful, she'll start to lay her batch of eggs in the cave in 1 month's time. She could lay as many as 30 eggs, although only a small number will survive. Content at last, the male dragon lies down to rest. The future of the dragons on Komodo is uncertain. Despite the introduction of strict poaching laws, illegal hunting and habitat destruction by humans still take place. However, these few hidden islands in Indonesia are now protected as a national park and biosphere reserve, which will hopefully allow these giants from a prehistoric age to thrive in the region once again.